Welcome to the 8th video in the series Research Without Tears. I should give you a little advisory up front that this one will be a little longer and maybe a little more in depth, and so you may want to pause and go get some iced tea so that you can sit at your leisure and make your notes, because I'm probably assigning an outline, which is what this is about, making an outline. Actually, for your research process, making 2 outlines. So let's first discuss why I'm having you do outlines, and then we'll talk about the rough outline, then we'll talk about the detailed outline. So why am I making you do any outline? This is really the heart of what I'm hoping to have you learn in my class with my research assignments. It's a skill set that is really important to academia, and it's also important to anybody who wants to think in a clear and organized way in their life, which I hope is everyone. So the skills that you need to learn, you can't just learn everything in one class. I realize that, although there was a time when I tried to make that happen. But there are 3 skills that I see more and more in our culture are lacking, and it's hard to teach them. And this culture, you know, as we shift to this more hyperlinked kind of cyber existence, it's getting harder and harder to find people who have these skills, but they're highly prized. So the first skill is processing information. There's a lot of information coming at us, and you may find a lot of information about your research topic, but actually understanding what's coming at you in a deeper than superficial way and being able to kind of relate it to things you already know and relate it to other things that you're learning is very important. So that's the first skill, processing. The second skill is organizing new information in relation to other information so that you can kind of see where something fits with other stuff that you're learning, or maybe other stuff that you already know, or other stuff that you just found. That's a very subtle and important skill. And then the third skill is taking information, say that you've got quite a bit of it, and it's in these kind of piles, and recombining it so that you use it in new ways, in a new order, and for new purposes. This is really the heart of what my research papers ask you to do. You're taking a bunch of information. You can't just plop it there and expect it to stand up and be a research paper. You actually need to do some work to get it to fit. It has to be related, each piece to what came before, and each piece to what's going to come after. And maybe the best way I can explain this is to use an analogy. There's a wrong way to do this, so we'll do wrong way, right way. So the wrong way is you're getting a bunch of stuff from all sorts of places and you're retyping it, and you're hoping as you retype it that it fits together and makes sense. That's typing, that's not a research paper. It's like the analogy is going to the grocery store and putting stuff in your cart and then just kind of rearranging it in your cart. It just sits there. There's nothing you can really eat. You didn't transform the raw materials. And in a research paper, the raw materials are all of those note cards with content on them that you can just kind of type and present, but that's not going to add up to a cohesive, coherent piece of research that goes from one point to another and actually leads the reader somewhere. So that's the wrong way. Don't do that. I get a lot of those papers. They don't do well. There's a right way to do it. And the right way involves taking your information, thinking about it, looking at all those cards, going back through them, thinking about how they relate to each other, how one might lead to another, and then reorganizing this evidence from several places so that it fits into a new schema, one that you came up with. That's your outline, to prove points that you want to prove, that you're in charge of proving, that you're not just kind of taking whatever comes and throwing it in a big chunk on the page. You're recombining it and you're making it work. So the analogy, to continue the grocery store analogy, is you're going to the grocery store, there's all this stuff there, you can access it, you can put it in your cart, you can even eat it raw or out of the box, but it's not as good. The research paper that I'm asking you to do is more like taking all those raw ingredients that were just laying there by themselves and combining them in the right order using a process and the right proportion, and you're making this wonderful cake. And who doesn't like cake? So that's what I'm hoping that you'll be able to do, to recombine the research and use it in a new way. So You may wonder, why is this a useful skill? Just let me text my life away. Well, lots of my students, not all, can find information. Students are very good at going out there and getting information. But the really interesting work in the coming century, if you want really interesting work, is not going to be that different in some sense from the interesting work in the last century. It's going to be for people who know how to find the information, but also how to analyze and apply the information. And outlining really teaches those skills: analysis, application, recombination. Those are things that you're going to be able to do if you learn outlining. So it's not just like a lot of information bombarding someone. It's organized in a way that's digestible, like a cake. So the last question, why am I making you do 2 outlines? Listen on. So let's talk first about the rough outline, then we'll talk about the detailed outline. We may actually do the rough outline in class using the assignment sheet that I've given you for your paper, because that's kind of what I'm going to ask you to base it on. And actually, you can write an outline even before you do much research. It'll look pretty much like what I'm asking you for on the assignment sheet, and we haven't gone out and reality tested that in a library yet to see if the information's out there, but at least you can have some idea of what you're looking for. And in fact, let's write an outline before you do much research, because a rough outline can help you with your research. How can it help you? Well, A, it will show you what you need. So that will focus your research in a way that will make you more efficient and effective. B, it will allow me to know that you know what you need, so that I'll feel like, okay, I can relax. She or he knows what she's looking for. And you do that by taking what I'm asking you for, like 3 questions or 5 parts or early, middle, and late history, and setting those up. So how do you do this wonderful set of 2 outlines? Well, start with your assignment sheet and go back to that and look at what I'm asking you for. Usually I ask you to answer 3 big questions, or I ask for 5 parts of your paper, or I ask for, early, middle, and late history. So look at what I'm asking for. And then you're going to set those main things as the main questions in the body of your paper. Of course, you have an introduction and then you have a conclusion, but the body of your paper is those questions. So let's say that there are 3, and let's say that we're going to ask about early, middle, and late history of something. So once you've got those 3 things kind of set, early is 1, middle is 2, late is 3, you're going to start filling in some subpoints beneath each one, and you're going to label those. So if I've asked for the early history of something, maybe you'd have 3 subpoints: A, origins; B, early life; C, relations to other people before some important turning point. And then the turning point would be your number 2, the middle history. So that would be how you'd set that up. And then you might have some ideas about things that you would put under origins, some different things that you might want to discuss, or things that you might want to discuss under early life, or things that you might want to discuss under relations to other people. So you'll know now that those are some things that you're going to be looking for. So third step is to use this as you do your research. You'll see what you need to look for on your outline. And then you'll also, anytime you see a piece of data or evidence out in the world, anytime you see something that you think, that seems to relate, you'll have a good sense of how it fits into your schema, where in your outline you're going to be able to use that. And as you're doing your research then, you'll have a strong sense of what order to put things into. And finally, big advantage, as you're researching, you'll know what your gaps are. If you're finding a lot on the big number 1 and the big number 3, but not much on the middle topic, the middle history, then you know that you have to focus some more research there or get some help for that particular big topic and the subtopics that would go under it. The fourth point is that it's natural, and it's important that you know, as you research, things are going to change. You may not find information on a subpoint, or you may decide that subpoint is lame, I don't really need that. But you can abandon the subpoint, and you can substitute another point that you've found information about. You don't have to stick with the rough outline. You can change that. You can make it better. You can take stuff out or put new stuff in. It's just to get you thinking in terms of what my expectations are for the content of your paper and also for its organizational structure. So last but not least, the detailed outline that you're going to turn in when you're fairly far along in the research process. Why am I making you do this? Well, first of all, it will help you see how to organize what you actually have. Secondly, it will identify for you where there are gaps that necessitate further research. And thirdly, it will help me see whether you're covering what I need you to cover, which is important, 2/3 of the way through the process. And then fourthly, it will help you avoid the chunk problem. So let me discuss the chunk problem, and then you can see how this relates to your outline. The chunk problem is when students, it's very junior high, take a big chunk from one author and take it over and drop it into their paper in one big solid piece. And it's not elegant, and it's not really good research. I mean, it's basically, just chunking it. What I'm really trying to make you do, and go back to that cake analogy from a few minutes ago, is to take stuff from several sources and mix it together so that you're interweaving, so that several sources are coming to bear upon one subtopic, so that you've got some complexity in terms of how you're dealing with that topic. So, second question, when do you do this? Well, this is what you do when you're pretty well researched out. You have lots of material, and now you need to get it organized. So how do you do that? Number 3, you get your note cards out, and you get that really rough outline that you were doing earlier in class. And then you also get out my assignments page. And with the assignments page and the rough outline in front of you, you go through your note cards. And you start looking at them. What's dealing with the first major point, the early history? What's dealing with that middle piece of history? What's dealing with the third big question, like the late history? So you can put them in those 3 piles, or 1, 2, 3, ABC, 1, 2, 3, ABC, the song. So then, once you have things in those 3 piles, you think about, okay, what subtopics are represented in my pile, this big pile on origins. So maybe on origins you've got a bunch of stuff about geography, maybe you've got a bunch of stuff about demographics, maybe you've got a bunch of stuff about economics or a bunch of stuff about daily life. So those would be your labels: economics, daily life, demographics, geography, for the subtopics. So you'd label them 1 for your big topic, which is origins or early life, and then you label them economics, demographics, etc. So use these labels. And then make your piles not only by big topic, but by subtopic, little piles within the big piles by subtopic. And you'll know that if you don't have anything in a pile, you either need to work around that and not include that in your paper, or you might have to do some more research quickly to make sure that you can cover that. As far as outlining, then you look at what's in a pile, a little subpile, 2 cards, maybe as many as 20 cards. And here comes the kind of brain work. Up until now, you've just been sorting and you've been kind of putting stuff in piles that relates. Now you have to think about logic and order. So you need to think, what makes sense for me to talk about first? Well, first things first, definitions, basics, chronologically the most early thing that happened. And then what makes sense next? Well, what happened in the middle, or how something developed, or what the next things were that happened. So you want to put them in chronological or logical order. Either one is fine. Or you want to group them by themes, but then if you're talking about bananas, you need to explain first where they came from and what they are before you can explain how people started to domesticate and cultivate them, before you can explain how early cultures used them. Those things go in a logical order. So you're going to outline on your detailed outline every topic and subtopic, and pretty much every card is going to be represented. Everything that you know is going to go on to that detailed outline. And then, finally, what's next? You're going to use that detailed outline to write your paper. It's going to give you a really good guide. You can work now at your leisure on getting gracefully from one piece of evidence to the next, because you've already thought through how they're going to logically fit together, how one is going to lead to another, which is going to lead to another. You know that they belong together because they're leading from one to another, because you, thanks to your outlining process, know where you're going. Every card is prepared for by what came before it, and every card leads to whatever's next, or you can transition to whatever's next. So good luck, come for help, don't be a stranger, come for help, learn this. It will help in school and in life. Did I say to come for help? Good luck.